Oh, thank you, worship team. Well, you can have a seat. Anybody grow up as a child singing that song in a church? Do you remember? Do you still remember the sign language for it? Does everyone still remember the sign language? Yes is yes, and this is Jesus, sign language, and this is loves. Oh man, I still remember it to this day. It was a long time ago. Well, if you have your Bible, and I hope you do, let's get started. James chapter 1. James chapter 1. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. There is a Bible right in front of you. That will be page 1207 in the Pew Bible in front of you, page number 1207. As you turn there and get started, let's talk about the third commandment. Which is, or what is the third commandment? The third commandment is, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. For the Lord will not hold him guiltless that takes his name in vain. Don't ascribe God's name to just anything. It is precious and should be treated as such. So, with that, let us move to James. James chapter 1. I do have a lot to say this morning, so I'm going to jump right into it, but I will address first the doctrine of this morning. You'll notice it in your bulletin in front of you, and I would like to change it slightly. It's funny that I give this to the secretary in the time that she asked for it, but my brain keeps going, doesn't it, Pastor? And you never stop thinking and overthinking oftentimes. Christians, if we are to live a life of faith, then we will endure trials of faith. We will pray with confidence and we will stay focused. I'll make it a little shorter. We will stay focused. So with that said, James is going to outline this, and so we're going to read it. James chapter 1. I'll start in verse 2. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But he must ask in faith without any doubting, for the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For that man ought not to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord, being a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. But the brother of humble circumstances is to glory in his high position. And the rich man is to glory in his humiliation, because like flowering grass, he will pass away. For the sun rises with a scorching wind and withers the grass, and its flower falls off, and the beauty of its appearance is destroyed. So too the rich man, in the midst of his pursuits, will fade away. Blessed is a man who perseveres under trial. For once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then when lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good thing given and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shifting shadow. In the exercise of his will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, so that we would be a kind of first fruits among his creatures. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, let's go back to the beginning, a very good place to start. And let me first say this morning that James is not saying, hopefully encouraging you this morning, that James is not saying, telling you to enjoy trials and tribulations. Let me say that again, okay? When James says, consider it joy, he is not saying, take pleasure in the fact that you're going through a difficult, hard time right now. Let me say it one more time, okay? I am not telling you, James is not telling you to be happy when you experience difficult times. When money and resources are low, when friends and family abandon you, reject you, or are mean to you, when depression, anxiety, and fear take over your emotions, no one is telling you to be happy about it. What I am encouraging, what James is concerned with here, reaches really far beyond the trials, the difficult times, the tribulations you're experiencing, the stresses, the frustrations, the environment and people around you day to day, every day, all the time. His concern is addressing the trial of faith, the difficulties that come as a result of being a Christian. He's saying to his reader that you shouldn't throw in the towel. You shouldn't give up when you face difficulties, but rather you should endure them patiently. I don't know about you, but I picture a boxer in the ring here, mainly because I also grew up watching a lot of Rocky on TNT back in the day. If anyone asks what the best Rocky movie is, as I have a feeling you're asking, okay, and you're wondering, it's Rocky III, all right? Anyone echo this? No, okay. Cesar says the fourth one, and everyone knows that's the worst one. No, I picture a boxer in the ring who's getting beat up, who's tired, who's bloody, who's fighting. Don't give in. Don't give up. Don't quit. Don't abandon. Don't feel or be defeated. Don't abandon long-term obedience. Don't become impatient for the sake of comfort or for the sake of an inappropriate, timely escape from a trial you're going through. Rather, what James is saying is persevere, endure through trial, through rejection, because that's the stuff that's going to produce endurance. That's the process that Christians, we're called to endure. We're called to experience, he says in verse 3. If we have an interpretation of all the pressures of life that make life difficult to live at times, if we understand, James says, that all things happen around us, to us, all things going on, all this stuff in light of a God who does exist, not only exist or is not only sovereign, but also is pretty good, is also loving and caring and kind, then there is a pretty good reason for why it's happening. And the reason, he says, is to mature your faith. The purpose is to purify your faith, to make you or I someone complete, more complete than we are currently now without having gone through it. I do realize that I've preached on suffering twice now. First, the Romans passage in Romans chapter 5, and now this one. I don't know why I'm consumed with it, but we are consumed with suffering, aren't we? What James is saying is change your interpretation. Change your attitude about the difficulties that you're facing, because the purpose is to mature your faith, is to purify your faith, to make you or I someone complete. Again, say it one more time. Don't be happy about it. I'm also not saying that you can't ask questions. There's going to be a section addressed specifically to asking questions in just a minute. I'm also saying you don't have to be cool about it when it happens. What I am saying is don't try to avoid it. Don't try to escape it. But also, don't be content with it. Don't give up. Don't embrace your life as it is now, because your life is so much more than what you are going through right now. Yes, there are good things in life to enjoy. Yes, there is life, and yes, there is family. Yes, there is love and relationships, but there's also loss, isn't there? There's also tragedy. There's also death to be experienced. But in this life, we're not to live embracing either one of those things, both good or bad things. If we are, then we are what James says in the next verse or the next section here, like waves in the ocean, going back and forth, commanded by our emotions. Our faith is based on emotions. No, we are called to embrace not the experiences themselves. We are called to embrace life as God has purposed for us, seeking after a God who seeks to reveal himself to us, especially in moments like trials. So endure and be patient in times of trials. But I can say, like many of you, and like Pastor, as you alluded to, when trials come our way, I can't help but ask why and wonder. And so I like where James takes the conversation next. He says in verse 5, he doesn't really skip a beat, probably anticipating such a question, but he immediately starts talking about those who may be lacking in something, may be lacking in a kind of joyful interpretation, right? This God-purposed attitude about trials, patient endurance. And he says in verse 5, if any of you are lacking in this understanding, what should you do? You should pray. You should pray and ask God to give you wisdom. First of all, did you know that your imperfections don't disqualify you from being a child of God? Are you thankful for that this morning? That your worries or your stress or your anxiety, your imperfections do not disqualify you from being a new person in Christ? But also now, we'll get back to the text. This mention of wisdom is interesting, and it is something that James will talk about more in chapter 3, but we should highlight it. First of all, this wisdom is not selfish. It's not wanting what you want and getting it when you want it. It's also not jealous. This wisdom is not wanting what others have and doing what you can to get it. Rather, this wisdom is peaceful, it's gentle, it's merciful, it's unwavering. No matter what happens, no matter where your emotions are or your life finds you in, situations your life finds you in, it's also without hypocrisy, he says. This wisdom, again, is not about me. It's about God and what God has for me. But if you've got questions about it, I love that. If you've got questions about it, James says, go ask him. And I love it. It's pretty cool. First of all, because the process of all this, the process of endurance and patient endurance is asking questions. And please, somebody tell me they don't like asking questions. Oh, who doesn't like asking questions, man? First of all, man, you like asking questions. God is going to answer the question. He's going to provide, he's going to give, and he's going to provide, he's going to give because he's generous. I mean, holy cow, God gives. And he's not a God who is devious with his gifts. He's not a God who upbraids people who come to him and ask him for things. Are you thankful for that as well? I mean, first of all, this is honestly the central message of the gospel, okay? Let's make it simple or centralic, okay? The central message of the gospel is God provides, God gives what he demands. God provides, God gives you what he demands from you. If you're having a hard time realizing a God-purposed joy, if you're having a hard time being patient as you're going through trials, that's cool, James says. No worries, because God is a God who will get you there. God is a God who will give you patience. God is a God who will give you endurance. You just got to go to him. And you just got to go to him. You just got to ask him. And might I add, unlike a lot of giving done by most of us humans, his giving has no strings attached to it. But be mindful that when you do go to him, that he might give you something you did not expect. But I can assure you, he will give you wisdom. And I think this is something as Christians we far too easily forget, that if we go to him, then he will find us. Or if we seek him, he will find us. And I think oftentimes we forget it because we might be afraid of him finding us. But this whole idea of a conversation with God came up in the news this week. Does anybody see the article? Anybody seen the news? Did you see it? Oh, yeah, okay. So a star on a popular show came out and, interestingly, mocked a Christian faith of one of our leaders. It was Vice President Mike Pence, and called it, quote, mental illness. Did anybody read this? Anybody hear about this? No? Okay. Vice President Pence has since responded, and he responded very politically. He did a great job responding politically. I would not have done so well responding the way he would have responded. So he did a fantastic job. But, I'm sorry, also, is the sound weird? Is it often? I'm so sorry if I'm distracted by it. I apologize. Why is he called mental illness? The star says, it's one thing to talk to Jesus. I'm quoting this, okay? It's one thing to talk to Jesus. It's another thing when Jesus talks to you. Why? Because the star says hearing voices is a mental illness. Listen, guys, all right? If you seek him, he's going to find you. That's all there is to it. Why? Because God is not just a God who is there. God is not just a God who's sovereign. God is not just a God who's in control, but God is a God who is loving, kind, and generous. So pray with confidence, as James says. Don't doubt the generous of God. Don't rely on yourself in times of difficulties. Rely on him because he will provide for you. The last thing that James mentions here, starting in verse 9, is distractions. That's why I said initially, don't be distracted. But that's negative. So I didn't want to be negative, right? I wanted to be positive, and that's what I was taught in homiletics, and I obviously forgot it at that moment in time, and then remembered it. So, yeah, so the distractions of life, and there are two things he mentions about distractions. The first one is a distraction of money, of riches. And I don't think we need to, well, first of all, let's back up, because my notes say to back up. All right. Remember, he starts addressing the attitude of patient endurance, and he says, don't give up. And then he says, okay, if you're struggling with that, then pray for God to give you patience, to give you endurance, to give you an attitude of endurance. And then now he turns his audience attention to the attitude of not just giving up, but now giving in. Giving in to the things that are going on around you. And the first one that he talks about here is money in the passage. And I don't think we need to limit our conversations to this solely money, but perhaps resources in general. And so please don't get me wrong. What I'm not saying is don't work hard. And so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my week. And I'd love to hear about your week. But check out the crazy busyness of my week. And I'm sure it's like every one of yours. Children wake up early, so you get things ready for them. But on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays, Andrea goes to work in the morning. My wife goes to work in the morning. So I have the kids, or Addison, send Colin to school. Most mornings I do a better job than others. Other times I forget. But the children are at least alive when Andrea comes back home. They may not have been fed or whatever, but they made it through. And then when she gets home about 1:30-ish, I basically high-five her, and I go to work, all right, on those days. And some days I get home 7, other days 7:30, sometimes earlier. And then on Tuesdays, I'm here in the office, just roughly until I need to go to work again, and then come home at 7:30. And then Wednesdays, I have meetings at my other job, and so I go to those at around 9 and get home at like 6:30, because I'm coming home from Rockport on that day. And then Saturday, you guys know I don't typically hang out here or with young adults. I was with them yesterday. I do some paperwork for my job, and then Sundays I'm here. And then Monday I do it all over again. Like everyone here works really hard. I'm not saying don't work hard. What I am saying, what James is saying, is don't view success in this life as how hard you work or did work. Why? Because riches, money, success, and even the ability to work hard, I hear getting old is the worst, right? The ability to work hard will pass away. And if that's where your thinking is, James says, if that's what you're focused on, then you'll fade away. You will give in and not reflect the character of God himself in yourself. Yes, wealth and success is impressive, but folks, death is coming, and the whole adage is you can't take it with you. And I think what's interesting here, especially historically and textually speaking, we know that Paul did an extensive campaign of raising finances. Where was he doing this? All throughout Asia and the Greek peninsula, and they were all to go to the support of the poor church in Jerusalem. We have texts in Romans and 1st and 2nd Corinthians that provide us with this information. And this might very well be the backdrop for James's conversation here. He's going to touch on the dignity and the blessing of those who are lowly and do experience trials more than the rich. And so I guess the least that I could say here is if you do have provisions, large or small, if you do have resources, if you do have connections, if you do have people around you, if you do have a solid work ethic, if you do have skills, if you do have insights, then use them to support. Use them to support the poor, the lowly, because God is about them. God says he will raise them up. And I might add, as a church, we too should be a church who are about them, the low and the poorly, seeking to meet their needs. I'll tell you a quick story. Last men's prayer breakfast, so this month. First of all, if you are a guy, you should really try and make it. It's a nice time to get together, but also we purposely get together with the Ryan house, the halfway house that's here in Lynn. The gentlemen come over. And I'm sitting there, we're having breakfast together, And one of the guys who's been a regular, he comes up to me and says, "Oh, do you remember the guy you were talking to the last time we were here?" Of course, I didn't, but he jogged my memory. And I said, "Oh, yes, he was from the South, and we talked a lot about college football and the life differences of living in the South and living here in New England. And yes, I remember him." And he says, "Well, we lost him last month. He went out and made some bad choices and didn't come back. And it was an overdose situation." So the lowly, those most riddled with trials, temptations, are the ones we need to be most about. And may I add here, I want to totally go out on a limb and may hurt some feelings, and it's not intended to be so, but it is intended to be challenging. Might I dare say that a once-a-month breakfast and sharing of the gospel and fellowship with these gentlemen might not be enough investment. But that is more of a story, another sermon. The last distraction James mentions is that of sin itself. That's giving into temptation. Now, I want to be clear that I don't believe that temptation itself is a sin. We have to remember, like James, I think our response to temptation could result in sin. Keep in mind where we've come from. The process of trials and difficulties could result in life, right? But also, likewise, the progress of testing, the progress of temptation could result in death. And I think it's helpful to speak of these two attitudes, the one of giving up and the one of giving in the same way. So here I have to say, like James, temptations to give up or give in don't come from God. Now, I was struck by that this week, and especially this morning, because I do believe in a God who is there. I do believe in a God who is sovereign. I do believe in a God who is in control. And I do believe in circumstances in this life. I do believe they do not catch God by surprise. But if God is such, if God is also loving and caring, then why do these horrible trials, why do these awful temptations, these things happen in our lives? Why do they occur? And I was talking to even Pastor this morning about this, and the idea, is the end result of all of this. The end result is not condemnation. The end result of this is not damnation and separation from God. It's not evil, it's not ill, it's wonderful. It's being patient, enduring, and at the end receiving a crown of life. This is James talks about. But it's really hard to be patient in times of temptation. It's really hard not to give in times of temptation. Just like it's really hard to not give up. It's really hard to not give up in times of trials because of our own sinful nature. And I think far too often we give Satan far too much power. I think, as James mentions here, all of this comes from us, the result in the corruption of our flesh. And I think in many respects we need to be real with the corruption that is within us. The issue of the heart, the fallen sinful nature that we've all inherited from Adam, but God is just as creative as he is generous. So we're going to live a life of faith, then we're going to patiently endure trials. If we're going to live a life of faith, then we're going to pray with confidence. We're going to trust in him, not in ourselves. We're going to go to him and ask him to give us what we need, and he will be generous and give. But we're also going to live a life of faith. Then we are going to stay focused on the fact that God is creative. He is at work. His will is working out, James says, in us, making us, creating us to be the first fruits of his creation. And that means one of two things. One, if we are the first fruits, then what? There's going to be more. And then two, we have some work to do still. God has still work to do in and through us in this creation. We've got some creating to do ourselves. There is still work yet to do and accomplish. God is still at work in and through us so that much more fruit might come. And that's why he gives us gifts. So, a note of challenge. I don't know what your gift is. I don't know how God has created you uniquely as he's created me uniquely. But the point and the purpose of this, if we are living a Christian life, and even, might I add, life at Austin Square Baptist Church. And I've said this before, and I'll say it in this way. If the church at Austin Square will be a church at Austin Square in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, it will be because God is at work in you, and you are employing said work and gifts in the life and body at Austin Square and in the people that he is connecting you with in this community. So don't give in to temptation. Stay focused on the work of God at hand. Stay focused on the work that he is doing and has yet to accomplish. So, in your moments of trial, in your moments and times of seeking after him, and in time and effort spent on focus on his work in and around you, the point is, the prayer is, the encouragement is, yes, the challenge is there, that we all might be living a life of faith. Yes, there is change and shifting with us. I change my mind all the time. I forget a lot of things. I'll tell you a quick story. I left yesterday morning for like 20-ish, 30 minutes. My in-laws weren't there at the house, and I left the door wide open. Did you see that too? And then the other day, got the kids out of the car and left the car door open for I don't know how long. I forget things all the time. There is change happening, imperfections happening with me daily. But isn't it good news to know that there is no change, there is no shifting, there is no alteration, there is no manipulation as you try to manipulate the shadow on the wall, right? There is no manipulation when it comes to the purpose and character of God. He is worth your confidence. He is worth your time and effort in staying focused, and he is worth being patient and waiting on. Our sovereign, gracious, generous God never changes, and he loves to shower us with goodness and creativity. So, live a life of faith. Endure trials. Be patient. Pray with confidence. Trust in him. Lean on him, not yourself. And stay focused. Don't be distracted by the things that are going on around you. Stay focused on the creative work that is within you and at work outside of you in this world around you. Live a life of faith. Endure trials, pray with confidence, and stay focused. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for ultimately the work you have finished, completed for us on the cross in your Son. Thank you for the new person that we are in him. Thank you for the generosity and the love and the patience that you have towards us, seeking us, finding us even while we were wandering from you, fleeing you. And Lord, in light of your continued faithfulness and endurance and patience, let us be a people who are long in our obedience towards you, who are patiently enduring trials so that we might be perfect like you one day, Lord. Lord, be with us as we seek after you, Lord. Lord, we often are afraid perhaps that you may actually find us. But Lord, give us a perspective on seeking you that is open and obedient to what we receive from you, Lord. And lastly, Lord, be with us in our moments and trials of temptation, testing, Lord. Let us be able to stay focused on the creativity that is at work within us and through us, Lord. Holding on to the hope that we have with life in you and not death or separation from you, Lord. We ask all of this in your Son's name. Amen.